Welcome back to another Growing in Grace podcast.
Oh, Jesus.
I mean, God bless you. Welcome back to another Growing in Grace podcast. We're glad that you're with us today, and we want you to like, share, and subscribe to this Growing in Grace podcast, where we are growing in grace and knowledge. And we've been working with mental health issues and things that affect our mental health. And we also are working with how to work with a family. And we may sometimes have family members who are having a challenge, and we're working with how we might be able to manage the do's and the don'ts of different mental health challenges. And we have a special guest with us who has been with us before, and glad to have her back.
Yes.
And this is Terica Culver.
Yes.
Did I say that right?
Terica.
Terica.
That's all right. That's
The
okay.
we just went over
We
that.
did. That's all right.
Terica, Terica Culver. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. We're not gonna let it go this time.
Right.
We're
We're not
gonna
gonna
get
let
it
it go.
right. We're gonna get it right.
Exactly.
Terica Culver.
Yes.
Glad to have you.
Yes,
Glad
sir.
for the knowledge that you have and your ability to work with people who are going through these challenges.
Yes.
And you have experience working with families that are dealing with. Name some of the mental health issues that some of the families deal with.
Well, I will say some of the more common one is like major depressive disorder. You have some with generalized anxiety. Those are more common post COVID. We also have PTSD, which is post traumatic stress disorder. We have, with kids in school, we have a lot of behavior like oppositional defiant conduct disorder. We have bipolar, which is very common in like adults.
Yes.
And of course, we have the most common one that schools give like our little children, which is ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactive disorder. Um, we have a few with schizophrenia. You have some personality disorders. They're very rare because schizophrenia and things like that are in adults. And so the onset is more later in adulthood. So it's very rare that you see it, but you do see it. So the few that I name are more the common diagnosis that we see, especially post COVID today, that I've worked with.
Yes.
I've worked with a few that was like schizophrenia, but I've mostly done assessments for those that has schizophrenia. So it was pretty interesting, but it was, yeah, I have worked with that as well.
Yes, and what is your role when you're working with families in those different scenarios? What is your role in
So
helping
when
those
I
families?
work with them, I usually am the therapist,
Yes.
where we provide the therapy services, where we're talking pretty much just working through whatever issues they have. So it's just taking the time to really talk about the thoughts. What are your automatic thoughts? What is happening before you actually have a certain behavior? How does it play out in your mind before it shows up in your action? So that's my part of it when I work with clients. I also do some coping skills. You always kind of just by habit throw coping skills in there because it's just needed. You need to know how to manage your behavior, your responses. How when something happens, how do I manage this? How do I deal with it when I'm triggered? So I kind of play both roles, but mostly the therapist.
I
Mostly
see,
the
I
therapist
see.
role.
And the thing I think about what you said about the coping and everything, actually everybody has to have some type of coping,
Absolutely.
but with some you have to bring some awareness, more awareness and things
That's right.
to the forefront.
Mhm.
But others, some of it may come natural,
Natural.
but everybody needs coping skills.
Everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're
yeah.
exactly right. I can tell my clients sometimes because they don't normally like coping skills. They was like, "Well, I can do that," and I'm like, "Well, we only teach you because it's not happening naturally. So those of us that can do it naturally, we just practice it. We practice it all the time, but we give you ideas of how to cope with it because it's not happening naturally, and
Yes.
it's affecting how you function, how you interact with people, how you socialize. So that's why we teach those coping skills. So coping is just a part of our life. We do it every day.
Right,
We do
right.
it every day.
Yes, yes. So Um, so going into what we're talking about is the
Mhm.
do's and the don'ts for family members.
Mhm.
You've got let's use one ADHD.
Okay.
You have an ADHD child.
Mhm.
Usually, that's what you're dealing with. That
Yeah.
you're dealing with it in a childhood stage,
Exactly.
and so. What are some of the do's and don'ts when you're dealing with a child with ADHD? Which actually we're about to send our children back to school,
Right.
and
Yes.
when this airs, it's probably going to be like the
Mhm.
beginning of the school season for
Right.
some people.
Mhm.
And is this a time, and is this a season where assessments are going to start to be done in the beginning
Mhm.
of school years? You begin to notice
Yes.
behaviors and disciplinary problems,
Yep.
and so can you speak on that a little
I
bit?
can. So that's funny you said that because where I'm working now, the agency, we're kind of slow, but we always have an influx of
Uh-huh.
assessments and clients, especially children, when school start back
Mm-hmm.
because they go to school, they're having a hard time sitting down, they can't
Mm-hmm.
focus, they're distracted, they will not listen,
Mm-hmm.
just up and down. And of course, a lot of them, school counselors have a limit that
Mm-hmm.
they can go to. So the mental health portion of it, they don't really focus on. So
Mm-hmm.
they'll refer them to us. And one of the major ones is ADHD, which
Mm-hmm.
is attention deficit hyperactive disorder.
Mm-hmm.
So it got two components, which is the inattention, which is just easily distracted, can't focus, just disorganized, has a hard time turning assignments, and it usually goes in children from the age of maybe 5 or 6 to about 16, 17, 18.
Mm-hmm.
It changes over to ADD for adults.
I
So
see.
the hyperactive part is usually eliminated, but
I
it
see.
changes to ADD for adults. And then the second component of ADHD is the impulsivity, where they're just fidgeting,
Mm-hmm.
constantly moving, got to constantly talk, can't sit down for a long period of time, intrusive. The teacher up there trying to talk, they just butting in, constantly interrupting. So ADHD is one of those, you constantly see. So sometimes it could be misinterpreted as, oh, they're just bad.
Uh-huh.
Or you need to teach them how to sit down.
Mm-hmm.
They just need to be taught how to sit down. And sometimes it's not that. It's literally, a chemical imbalance that caused that attention issue
Mm-hmm.
within that child.
Mm-hmm.
So as a family member, sometimes is some parents notice it,
Mm-hmm.
and some parents are like, well, I don't really want my child to have services. They don't want that particular label or diagnosis
Mm-hmm.
because it's out there that it can be a misdiagnosis. But sometimes getting that help and that teaching the kids how to cope, how to sit down, showing them different ways when they do feel fidgety can help them.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the do's and don'ts, like with family members, is don't tell them that they're bad. You know,
Mm-hmm.
don't tell them that, oh, um, you should try to sit down. You can sit down. Don't discount that behavior because it could literally be, a part of the diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
So one main thing is to make sure that you help them focus. If
Mm-hmm.
you see that they don't have the attention, talk to them about it.
Mm-hmm.
You, as a family member, ask the child, what do you need? Why are you distracted? What's causing you to be unfocused?
Mm-hmm.
What can I do to help you focus?
Mm-hmm.
Sit down and work with the child
Mm-hmm.
together.
Mm-hmm.
That helps them focus. It helps with sometimes with the impulsivity. It just kind of helps bring them back instead of just saying, oh, you know, something negative. We
Yes.
want to avoid the negative
Yes.
at all times.
So how is it that some parents they don't want to label their child as ADHD? Uh, I don't think I said that right.
You did.
Okay.
Got
They
it.
don't want to say that, but then they will label them as bad.
Right. Well, I don't think it's just the label, it's just the diagnosis portion of it.
I see.
Because it can lead to, people, it can lead to like IEPs in school, which can
Mm-hmm.
lead to special education classes. And parents don't want that for their child.
IEPs.
IEPs are individualized education plans
Yes.
where the child can be pulled out of the classroom
Mm-hmm.
into a smaller group,
Yes.
and parents, we want our children to flow like everybody else.
I understand.
And so you don't
Yes.
want, so they don't want that label.
Mm-hmm.
And so they, even if you give them that diagnosis, they'll be like, oh, I want a second opinion. Or I want to,
Mm-hmm.
let me take them to the psychiatrist. Let me have a psychological evaluation completed.
Yes.
They want those different opinions until that, I guess they want it to magically disappear.
Yes.
And then it'll show back up when they get in middle school, high school, and now they're being suspended or expelled from school because of these same issues.
In which some end up going to alternative schools,
They do.
and so not only are they not pulled, what they were trying to avoid them being pulled out of a classroom, but now they're being pulled out of
Out of
a
a whole school.
out of a whole school.
Yep.
And but I did want to really focus in on the bad label because that's something that can actually begin to scar the child if you call them bad.
Right.
So now you're really putting a name on them
Right.
that says that they are bad, and why would you call them that
Right.
when that's not what you want them to be?
Right.
Even if they're behaving badly,
Exactly.
don't say that that's who they are.
Right. Yeah. I don't think people have, it's just sometimes that's all we know, right? So we just gonna say they bad because they won't sit down. But we don't really think about how it can affect the child
Yes.
growing up. Like somebody said I'm bad. Some kids just kind of take on to it. They said I'm bad, so I'm just
So
gonna
and
be
then
bad.
they just embrace that,
Right.
and then they go on. They lean into
Absolutely.
it.
They lean into
say,
it.
yeah,
They
they
go
told me I
all
was
in.
bad, and
Yes.
I'm bad to the bone
I'm gonna
too.
be it. That's what
I'm
they
gonna
said
show.
about me.
I'm gonna
Right.
show
I'm
you.
gonna show you.
You
bad.
thought I was bad.
Exactly. So you definitely want to have the right label because it takes the focus off of being bad. It takes the focus off the behavior.
Yeah.
And now we're going to focus on making sure this child is not being as distracted.
Yes.
Let's give them some resources, some help, some assistance in the classroom so they can focus. And if they are unfocused, do we need to bring them by our desk? The teacher need to sit them by the desk to help them focus. Do they need an aide to help them? Give them that extra time. What can we do to refocus? Instead of just focusing on the behavior of not sitting down, it could be an underlining that they don't understand.
Yes.
Instead of just being bad. So that's why we have to help the parents recreate and give them more vocabulary to use.
Yes.
Instead of saying bad, let's just say he's not able to focus. Or this particular child has an issue with understanding their words, so that's why they up and down in their chair. Or maybe they just fidgety. So let's give them something, keep them occupied at their desk so they won't have to get up.
Yes.
And give some rewards, put something in place to help them focus. So you just want to redirect and change the wording, change the vocabulary
Yes.
to something. Well, ADHD may not be positive, but it's definitely like, I'm just going to lean into being bad,
Yes. 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 And the other thing, could you also have a scenario where the child is actually bored because they are actually intelligent and they've finished their work before others, and actually they need to be challenged more?
Absolutely.
Can you have that? Can that be a scenario as well?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's where the misdiagnosis come in sometimes because you have children that are, very smart, and you're teaching the rest of the class at the level they're supposed to be, but this particular child, they already know it. They've learned it or they get it. So you have to just learn ways to challenge that particular child. And sometimes it's hard for teachers because you got this one child that's far above the rest. And so now I know they try to put everybody that's on the same level in pretty much same classes. So yeah, definitely you can have where the child may be just needs to be challenged a little bit more. Maybe they need more work. Give them harder work. If whatever the class may be working on, give them 4 or 5 worksheets instead of 2 or 3, and let them work on it. And move them at the pace where they're learning, and that can cut down on behavior. Very much so. My son was like that. He was 3, but because I was stay-at-home mom, I told him all his ABCs. So when he went to pre-K, he knew everything. And so the teacher was like, he won't sit down. I was like, well, you have to give him a little bit more work. He knows his he knows his alphabet. He knows his numbers. And so he knows.
And he's already kind of he's speaking Spanish.
Yeah, all of that.
I'm just being humorous.
Right. He's
But
doing all of that. So
uh,
he wouldn't sit down. So I was
uh,
like, well, you have to challenge him a little bit more.
yeah.
So we won't go into the labels. And that's another do of the family.
Hmm.
When if you see that from a teacher that's saying, hey, this particular child won't sit down, da 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 da, and you say, well, what's going on with the work? It's okay for the family to say, hey, challenge my child a little bit more.
Yes. Yes.
And then speaking with the child, hey, what's wrong? What's happening?
Yes.
What do you need from me, or what do you need from your teacher in your classroom
Mm.
to help with this behavior? So
Yeah.
you can be focused. And if they say, well, I get finished with my work early, I don't have nothing to do. Okay, that's when the parents should go to the teacher and say, hey, can you provide him with a little bit more work?
Hmm.
Extra worksheets, give him another
Hmm.
project or
Hmm.
whatever.
Hmm.
Move on to the next assignment so and then we can come back and evaluate how the behavior is before we move to diagnosis and evaluations and all of that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So as you always want to advocate for the child.
Yeah, and that's what I was.
Hmm.
Yeah, so you have to be an advocate for,
Absolutely.
uh, and so, but part of that is you've kind of got to have that awareness yourself
Hmm. Hmm.
of what might be going on,
Absolutely.
so that you're not misdiagnosed
Hmm.
or they end up taking medication that's unnecessary.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, so you definitely have to be an advocate. And for those parents that may not know,
Hmm.
it's always good. The counselors are there to give you those resources to
Hmm.
say, hey, reach out to this one. And most agencies, most counseling agencies, they'll help you. They'll
Hmm.
say, hey, this is what we see going on. If you don't need services, then we won't continue services. We'll just
Hmm.
give you, a referral for aftercare, maybe taking them to some type of sport, getting them involved in some type of recreational activity,
Hmm.
getting them involved with like Boys and Girls Club,
Hmm.
something they can do 1 or 2 afternoons to keep them occupied.
Hmm.
Get the family involved. What can mom do,
Hmm.
to keep her occupied, to make sure the child is getting what they need.
Yes.
So you definitely have to be that advocate and just be that, provide those resources for the
Yes.
family. For the ones that don't know, hey, let me help you out. Let me give you some awareness.
Hmm.
We're here as therapists to say, I'm going to show you some awareness that you may not have.
Uh huh.
So I'm going to help you have a little bit more awareness. Let me
Hmm.
show you what's out here. Let me show you what it looks like. Let me
Hmm.
tell you what the symptoms are.
Hmm.
Do you agree? Do you see this in your child? And most times they'll be like, oh yeah, I see that all the time.
Hmm.
Like, and you want to encourage them that it's not a bad thing.
Hmm.
It's just here. Let's do something so we can manage it so they can continue to excel and succeed
Right.
in life.
Right. Right.
So.
And so early uh, advance awareness
Mhm.
is better than later.
Mhm.
Like you were saying, like when you get to like the middle school and the high
Mhm.
school, it's better to find those things out early on in like the elementary, and because by middle and high, you can have built in
Right.
those mechanisms, those coping mechanisms that will allow them to succeed through the rest of their lives.
Right. Yeah.
Hmm.
And so you don't want to do it too early because between 5 and 6 and certain ages,
Hmm.
it's just a part of being a child. Some
Yes,
things are just a part of being a child.
I
So you
see.
want to make sure that is not being misdiagnosed as a disorder
Okay.
either. So, but you do want to have that awareness. Hey, the teacher said he's not sitting down, and so when it turns into behavioral issues, that's when you're like, okay, this is a little bit more than just a 5-year-old issue. This is
Hmm.
a little bit more than just developmental age stuff
Hmm.
that comes with a 5 or 6-year-old. This
Hmm.
is a little bit more. It's a little bit more extreme. So yeah, you want to have that awareness because it can definitely, when they get to middle school, high school, the coping skills or whatever they've learned early on,
Hmm.
they can apply it
Yes, yes.
and they're able to succeed.
So that's more. It's more around the third to
Mhm.
fifth grade
Mhm.
where you kind of want to really be honing in on.
Mhm. Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, so ADHD is more of a neurological disorder.
Hmm.
So it can start early on, but you also have to just like I said, wean out some of those. What is age, and
Hmm.
what comes with age, and what is a little bit like we need to kind of look at this and see what this really is. So
Hmm.
you just kind of have to pay
Hmm.
attention to the child and see what's going on.
Okay, good,
Hmm.
good, good. All right, so let's go to another.
Okay.
Uh, you give me one. Which one you want to talk about
Well, I'll say I'll talk about bipolar.
now? Okay. Hmm.
Because, of course, the diagnoses have changed over the years, and
Mm-hmm.
the American Psychiatric Association came out with, updated version of diagnosis in their clinical book that we usually use, which is the DSM-5, which is our diagnostic book that we use
Mm-hmm.
to make those diagnoses. So with bipolar, of course, it's bipolar 1
Mm-hmm.
and it's bipolar 2.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people don't know the difference between them. So
Help us.
I will.
Okay.
So
Help
while
us.
they are very
Because
similar,
this is,
go ahead.
I'm saying, yes, help us because we're dealing with this stuff
Hmm.
and it's not being talked about enough.
Right.
And we have a lot of misunderstanding.
Hmm.
And I think one scripture says in the book of Hosea,
Hmm.
it says, my people are destroyed for lack of
Lack of
knowledge. And I
knowledge.
think we lack knowledge in these areas. We
Hmm.
need more knowledge
We do
because the more knowledge we have, the better we can handle what
handle
we're
it.
dealing with. The ignorance
Absolutely.
thing, ignorance is bliss. We need to move away from the
Right. We
ignorance
do.
thing. Let's learn and
Let's
know
learn.
so that we
Absolutely.
can know what to do.
Right,
Yes.
yeah. So with bipolar, I agree with that. With bipolar, I know we hear it a lot, especially in the African American community.
Mm-hmm.
We hear, "Oh, she bipolar." Like,
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean? Like,
Uh,
what does that mean? So, and I know it's a lot of times associated with, okay, 1 minute she happy, 1 minute this person is, upset, or they can be in a different emotion.
mm-hmm.
And so it's just having a clear understanding that maybe this is a don't throw out that this person is bipolar or
Mm-hmm.
you are bipolar, because there may be someone that really has a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
So bipolar 1, so we have bipolar 1
Mm-hmm.
and we have bipolar 2.
Mm-hmm.
Bipolar 1 is a little bit more extreme than bipolar 2.
Mm-hmm.
So with bipolar 1, you're going to have a manic episode. That is where a person they have a grandiose personality where they think so much about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They're very keyed up.
Mm-hmm.
So they may be able to clean for hours at a time, or they
Mm-hmm.
may be able to go somewhere for a long period of time. They're just like on this high,
Mm-hmm.
just going. Very restless,
Mm-hmm.
very, very restless. Very talkative, excessive talking. They're very irritable. Manic episodes can also lead to someone being hospitalized, like
Mm-hmm.
mental hospitalization. So
From
they'll
that high.
from that high,
I see.
because it's just a consistent high that usually lasts about 7 days. So this person is consistently on this path for 7 full days,
Not sleeping much.
not sleeping much, just going.
Uh,
And then once those 7 days are over, they will experience a depressive episode. So
yeah.
they're going to go into this place of sadness, depressed mood, probably going to have some irritability, crying, don't want to do anything, fatigue. Some people may even have recurring suicidal thoughts and things of that nature. So that is bipolar 1.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually found in adults only.
And what age does it onset? What age? Around what age?
Onset is usually, because with kids, it usually shows up as disruptive mood dysregulation disorder or intermittent explosive disorder, where they're just kind of irate for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
So it usually shows up between the age of 16 and 18.
Mm-hmm.
Usually the diagnosis is 18 or older
Mm-hmm.
for bipolar 1
I
and
see.
bipolar 2. So it's more for the adults.
I see.
And so that's bipolar 1's it's more intense.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we have bipolar 2, which is where you experience a hypomanic episode. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's almost like the manic,
Mm-hmm.
but it only lasts for like 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
And then you will have the depressive symptoms for about 2 full weeks. So this person may be depressed for 2 full weeks, just down.
Mm.
So
So would a contrast be that bipolar one is more on the manic side, and bipolar two is more on the depressive side?
yes, yes,
So you have shorter manic but longer depression.
longer depression.
I
Yes.
see.
And sometimes because it's more the depressive symptoms with the bipolar 2, people get misdiagnosed for major depressive disorder
Yes.
instead of the bipolar 2 because the manic is not as long,
I see.
it's more mild. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they may have the grandiose, but it's not as extreme as the manic. They may be a little keyed up, but it may not be as extreme as the manic portion of it. So it can be misdiagnosed, but yes, the bipolar 2 is more the depressive. You have more
Mm-hmm.
the depressive symptoms longer,
Mm-hmm.
and bipolar 1 is more the manic, and it's
Mm-hmm.
intense. And most times people that experience manic episodes, it can be either with psychotic features where there may be delusion, there may be hallucinations, it could be violence, all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then some have it without the psychotic.
Mm-hmm.
So it can lead to hospitalization though. So those are the differences between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. I just think it's always interesting because sometimes we get clients, they come in and they're 13. What's the diagnosis? Bipolar, not at 13. They're
Ah,
not bipolar.
I
So we
see.
so we as
And so, really, they just putting that on that person,
yep,
and they really
then really
don't know.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it may fit it, but let's look at it for a child,
Yeah.
right? Instead
Uh-huh.
of just focusing on, while, I mean, the symptoms are pretty much there, but we have to go with the diagnosis, the age range, and
Yes.
you just can't give people diagnosis.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
it's so good to know, the difference.
But it's funny though. People who are not trained will look in a book
Hmm.
and look on the line and they'll say, yeah, check.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm this. I'm
Yep.
this right
I'm
here.
this right
I'm
here.
this right
Mm-mm.
here. What?
No.
What? It was a hypochondriac where they
Hmm.
really look at symptoms and then
Hmm.
they'll claim.
Claim them,
They'll
yeah.
claim them. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just be sick all the time. I'm sick. I'm yeah. No.
Hmm.
So yeah, bipolar is that I find it very interesting because it's so different, and so you have your two different kinds,
Yes.
and so many people are just, and that particular word bipolar is just kind of thrown around.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh, she bipolar. Oh, this person bipolar. Oh, bipolar. I'm like, what? They're not really bipolar. If you really, really look at it, let's
Hmm.
maybe we can use a different term. you
Yes.
know, let's talk about it. Maybe they do have some emotional stuff going on, but it may
Hmm.
not be bipolar.
Right.
Maybe it might be mood swings,
Hmm.
which is not necessarily bipolar.
Right.
So
Hmm.
we want to call a thing what it is,
Hmm.
right? So we can be better prepared to work with it, to
Hmm.
manage it, to deal with it, right? And so, in one of the do's and don'ts, one of the things is one of the don'ts for family is don't make it seem like you relate to that person. Like,
Uh-huh.
I'm bipolar too, honey. No,
Uh-huh.
no.
Yeah.
This person actually has a diagnosis for it.
Yeah.
They're living the
Yeah.
symptoms. They're
Yeah.
experiencing the manic or the depressive, and you not. You just, you know,
You had a
you
situation.
have a
And so
situation.
then sometimes you bring up a
Absolutely.
thing. Say, well, remember the other day when your daddy did
Right.
this or your mama did X. You saw how I
Absolutely.
reacted. See, you see, I was fine,
Uh
and then
huh.
they did. Well, see, that's a situation.
That's the situation. Absolutely. So yeah, just making sure we don't because they kind of downplay
Yes, yes.
people's experience of what they may
Hmm.
really be experiencing.
Right.
So you just don't want to just say, "Oh yeah, honey, I was bipolar. Oh, I had a panic attack yesterday too." No,
Hmm.
not really. You
Hmm.
just was in a frenzy because you couldn't get it to work the way you wanted to. But
Hmm.
this person may have actually had a panic attack. So
Hmm.
you don't want to be dismissive
Yes.
with just not thinking, oh well, we on the same page. No, we're not.
Yes.
So you always want to be mindful that you don't want to invalidate
Yes.
a person's diagnosis
Right.
because
Right.
they are actually living it.
Right.
It's their reality. So
Hmm.
you always just want to be mindful of that.
Yes. So if a person has been diagnosed and they have medication that they're to take, how should a family member treat that person with that medication? Should they encourage them to take the medication, or should they encourage them to uh, a position where they can one day not take that medication? Or how do you see that?
So with medication, of course, there are some people that want it, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's some people that's like, I am not. I'm just taking it because the doctor said I need to.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as a family member, I think the first thing you can always say is, how can I help you?
Mm-hmm.
How can I help you? Whether it be, how can I help you with maintaining your medication regimen? How can I help you with making sure you have your medication? How can I help you with making sure you get into the psychiatrist to be able to get your refills and your medication and see them and get all everything that goes with that?
Mm-hmm.
What can I do?
Mm-hmm.
Do you need my, what can I do? How can I assist in making sure you're taking it every day? Do
Mm-hmm.
you need my help?
Mm-hmm.
If you need my help, I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because you always, especially with adults, you
Yes.
always want to be mindful that they are adults, right?
Yes. Yes.
They are adults, and as adults, from one adult to the next, we have to just provide that support.
Yes.
We provide that support, and we let them know, hey, I'm here. I'm going to make sure that if you need me, I'm here, right?
Right.
Now, if it's a situation where you know this person has to take their medicine in order to either maintain in the home or either maintain from if it's legal issues or anything like that, then as a duty, as that adult, then sometimes you have to say, you may have to give an ultimatum. You have to
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, this is your medication schedule. If you don't take it a day, this is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because for the safety of you and the next person, the health and
Yes.
everything,
Right. Right.
right?
Right.
So you have to just sometimes you have to put those structured things in place
Mm-hmm.
if it's needed, especially if the person is like won't take it and they're being non-compliant with medication. You have to give ultimatums and
Yes.
say, okay, this is what it is,
Yes.
and if they don't take it, this is what it is,
Yes.
right? And so you just want to be that support and
Mm-hmm.
do everything you can to help that client meet
Mm-hmm.
their goals
Yes.
of taking their medication. Make
Yes.
sure they get it because give them some good outcomes. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you take your medication, you'll be able to go to work. You'll be able to do
Mm-hmm.
what you want to do. But if
Mm-hmm.
you don't take your medication, what would normally happen?
Yes.
You know. So kind of bring them back to reality, that
Mm-hmm.
awareness to
Mm-hmm.
help them and just be supportive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, research shows that one of the things you don't want to do is say, "Did you take your medication? Are you okay? Did
Mm-hmm.
you take your medication? Or have you seen a therapist yet?" You know, if they
Yeah.
acting out or anything like that.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out, especially the person, their personality.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in relationship with them, whatever the relationship dynamic may be,
Mm-hmm.
you have to kind of work with that person to show support to say, hey, were you able to take your medication today, or do you need help or
Mm-hmm.
whatever? If you notice they're not,
Mm-hmm.
doing what they need to do, you always want to speak up.
Yes.
It's important.
Yes.
And then if they don't, you have to give an ultimatum and say, hey, this we got to work something out.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like this is a scenario where somebody's living in your house,
Yep.
and they're part of your household,
Right.
and what they could do to your household if they don't take their medication.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I can imagine it being different if they didn't live in your household.
Oh yeah.
If they didn't live in your household, that would be one thing. But if
Oh
they're
yes.
living in your household, you've got to maintain a certain order in your
Absolutely.
house,
Yeah.
and then if you can't maintain that certain order, then
Yeah.
you may not be able to be
A
in
part
this
of it.
house.
Yeah.
so
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
that's one of those things. But you got a family member outside of your house,
Mm-hmm.
then your responsibility is a little different
Yeah.
than somebody who lives in the house with you.
Exactly. So
Mm.
if they're living outside of your house, I mean, there's not much you can do.
Yes.
Um, you just want to, like I said, you just want to be supportive.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need me to go pick up your medication? Do you
Mm-hmm.
need me to take you to your appointment?
Mm-hmm.
And if they go to their own appointments, they pick up their own medication. All you can do is just check in. Well, how's it going? How you
Mm-hmm.
doing?
Mm-hmm.
How are things going?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you just want to open up the door for them to speak
Yes.
on what their feelings or what they may be experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
And 9 times out of 10, if
Mm-hmm.
they are experiencing anything or they have issues with their medication, they will let you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you just have to give them that opportunity. Always ask, how you doing?
Mm-hmm.
How's it going? How you been feeling? Is your medication doing okay?
Mm-hmm.
You can ask questions like that.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been able to adjust to your medication? That you got from the doctor. Is it doing okay? Any side effects? And they say, oh, I haven't been taking it. Oh, okay. Well, what you gonna do? How's that gonna work? Because
Mm-hmm.
you got to take your medication in order to go to work now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Mm-hmm.
just you don't have a lot of control, but you do have the opportunity to ask questions. You do have opportunities to show support,
Mm-hmm.
and you do have opportunities to ask those open-ended questions that allow them
Yeah.
to speak.
Yes.
And you have to be that listening ear.
Yes.
We don't want to fix it. We just need them to talk. Sometimes
Yes.
you just say, give me all the information. I just want to hear whatever you got to say.
Yes. And to that point, uh, wisdom says that sometimes you just got to be quiet and let everything flow,
Let it flow.
because if you shut them off and you start trying to fix it
Mm-hmm.
before you have all the knowledge,
Right.
then you may not get the rest of the knowledge because they'll shut down and
Absolutely.
not reveal other things
Other
that you
things.
may need to know so that you can help them appropriately
Mm-hmm.
and,
Right.
and properly.
That's
But
true.
without the knowledge, without the truth,
Truth. Right.
you
Yeah.
know, how can you treat
Mm-hmm.
something when you don't know the truth?
Exactly.
You know, how
Exactly.
can you work with a thing when you don't know the truth?
Right.
And so, something I'm hearing from you is the relationship is important.
Mm-hmm.
To ask certain questions, you need to ask it from a position of relationship.
Absolutely.
But I don't know you.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, well, I'm not going to use you, Terica. I said your name right.
Terica. It's okay.
I'm just going to rename you.
Right.
I'm
It's
sorry.
okay. That's all
Terica.
right.
Terica. Okay, so I'm the person with the problem,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't really know me.
Mm-hmm.
And then you ask me, you took your medication? Is that a good question to ask somebody that you don't have a relationship with?
Absolutely not.
That's what I'm. I'm
Mm-mm.
just trying to make that point.
No.
That's not a question you ask somebody that you don't
Mm-mm.
have a relationship with.
Absolutely not. Because
You
they're going to say no, and that's going to be it.
And then it might go manic,
Right.
or it might go to a bad place with you
Absolutely.
because actually you crossed a boundary
Um,
that you haven't established. You hadn't established a relationship, and you crossed the boundary to
right.
ask me that question
Right.
without a relationship with me.
Absolutely.
Sometimes people don't know that you can't say certain things to
Certain
people
things.
without a relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah, relationship is very important.
Hmm.
Even as a therapist-client relationship,
Yes.
is you have to build that trust.
Hmm.
And even when they get to know you and they feel like
Hmm.
they're comfortable and you can trust them, they can trust you, it's still like walking on eggshells. Like, well, let me see, can I say this? Or,
Uh-huh.
well, let me see how they respond to this.
Hmm.
Sometimes when I'm working with clients, if they want to tell me their life stories, I will listen all day
Hmm.
because I guarantee you everything I need to know is in that
It's
life
in the
story.
story. Hmm.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
They're going to tell everything. And after a while, they're going to, bit by bit, little by little, they're going to say something else that's going to open up a door. That's going to say another thing that's going to open up a door. Sometimes when I'm doing assessments, of course, they're very, especially those that are court ordered,
Hmm.
they don't want to share any information. So even though we have all the information, we just try to give them opportunity to share with us, like what's
Hmm.
going on, what happened, especially the kids.
Hmm.
They just like, I don't even want to be on probation. Well, we know you don't, but this is what it
Hmm.
is.
Hmm.
But sometimes if you could just get them to say one or two things, and eventually it'll open up a door.
Hmm.
And they might say, well, I did this, that, and they might say, well, I ran away. Oh, well, why you run away? And where were you going? And they might laugh.
Hmm.
I wasn't going nowhere. I was just coming back, but my mama had made me mad and da 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 da. Well,
Uh-huh.
what you get mad with your mama about?
Hmm.
And then what happened? And then I got locked up. Oh, that's why you got locked up. And
Hmm.
that's why you on probation.
Hmm.
And how many times you been out of school? Oh, I misspelled. Why?
Hmm.
And so every little detail started coming out,
And then you
coming
begin
out.
to see the patterns
The patterns.
and the
Yeah.
history and
Mm-hmm.
the behaviors, and
Absolutely.
then you begin to understand what's needed.
What's needed?
Because ultimately, that's what you're aiming for.
Absolutely.
You're aiming for how can
How
I
can I
help?
help?
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Yep. So
Hmm.
yeah, relationship is very, very, very important.
Hmm.
That's how you know to ask your questions. So we always encourage people to ask open-ended questions. That's
Hmm.
just asking a question that allows them to talk.
Yes. Hmm.
Don't give them a question where we're, like, Are you okay? It's a simple yes or no. They
Yes.
can't say yes, they can say no, and then that could be it.
I say,
So
well,
you want to
so are you
ask,
really okay? I told you I'm fine.
right, right.
I'm okay.
Go from bad to worse almost. But so you want to ask questions that allow them to
Mm-hmm.
talk, that allow them to share. You can say, "Hey, share with me share with me about your day.
What was your day like
What was
today?
your day like today?
Mm-hmm.
Share with me."
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's just open ended questions,
Mm-hmm.
just so they can open up. Not just a one word. And so that allows you a chance. That gives them the opportunity to talk.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you an opportunity to listen,
Mm-hmm.
which is sometimes hard because we like to fix,
Yeah.
right? We
Mm-hmm.
want to just fix it. We want to
Mm-hmm.
fix it. We want to
Mm-hmm.
fix it. And I think going back to coping skills that we started talking about, one of the coping skills I always give my families is active listening.
Mm-hmm.
Be ready to hear.
Mm-hmm.
You want to hear what they're saying. And even if that's repeating back what they said,
Mm-hmm.
like if they say, well, I became upset because I couldn't find my shoes, and then I didn't know why. It could just go on and on. But you want to say, so you mean
You got
so
upset because you couldn't find your
you couldn't
shoes?
find your shoes?
Uh-huh.
Well, why you couldn't find your shoes?
Uh-huh.
And so you just kind of you don't want to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to say, well, why you didn't look over here? Well, your shoes was over there. You might know where the shoes are,
Mm-hmm.
but you want to talk along with them
Mm-hmm.
so they know that you're listening.
Yes.
Because sometimes all they want is for somebody to hear them out.
Mm-hmm.
They don't
Mm-hmm.
want to. They don't want a solution. They're
Mm-hmm.
not ready to fix it.
Right. Right.
So you just need to listen.
Right.
So
Right.
relationship is so very important.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely important.
Yes. Yes. Because once you build that relationship, then they feel like they can talk to you.
Absolutely.
And the
Mm-hmm.
more they feel like they can talk to you, the more they
More
will
they'll
talk
share.
to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you can help them the
Mm-hmm.
more.
The more.
And this actually probably go across just, we've been talking about bipolar,
Mm-hmm.
but other things that people might need help with
Oh yeah.
in dealing with their illness or what have you.
Oh yeah.
The relationship is going to help in any
In any capacity.
in all of these that
Yeah.
you made mention of. You
Mm-hmm.
got another one you like to talk about?
Um, I think some of the more interesting ones is like PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder.
Mm-hmm.
We hear that thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
But it's a very intricate diagnosis. Like you
Yes.
can't just, I had a traumatic event, so now I have PTSD. No.
So it's not
It's,
just a military thing.
oh, no.
Okay.
It's not just a
Well, but
military
that's what
thing.
made, you hear a lot about
Yeah.
that from people coming back from a military
Right.
experience, but civilians have a lot of that as well.
Yes. And
Uh-huh.
so I think sometimes it goes back to that lack of knowledge. People really
Yes.
don't know.
Yes.
So PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, it's about the traumatic event. You have to be involved in a traumatic event, have to have witnessed it, or it happened to you directly.
Mm-hmm.
There are several things that have to be going on to say, yes, I have this, whether it's intrusive thoughts, where, thoughts are just taking over your mind, where you can't function, it's affecting your social life, your work life, everything that you do, dissociation, where you're just removed from reality
Mm-hmm.
because of these intrusive thoughts, because of the traumatic event.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Avoidance, don't want to talk about it. Feeling like you're guilty, like it's your fault, feeling the guilt, feeling the shame
Mm-hmm.
of whatever traumatic event happened. Just not able to think negative, not able to think positive about yourself, just always have this negative connotation about yourself
Mm-hmm.
because of the traumatic event.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the symptoms that make up post traumatic stress disorder. So it's not just a simple, oh yeah, I was in a car accident, or yeah, that set me back. The house fire set me back,
Mm-hmm.
or um, I saw something really strange on the road that was traumatic for me. It may have been, but we want to make sure we have all these other ones. I mean, and some diagnoses is like 2 or 3 you have to meet to be able to have the diagnosis. But with
Mm-hmm.
post traumatic stress disorder, you have to have all of them.
Ah,
You can't just have one. You
I
can't
see.
just have 3 of them. You have to have every single one of them.
Ah,
At least one out of each category, and I think that's 7 different categories.
yes.
And so if you don't meet one out of that category,
Mm-hmm.
then you have to go with something else.
Yes.
You may not. You might be stressed. You might be related to the trauma,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't have post traumatic stress disorder,
Mm-hmm.
that mental health issue.
Yes.
So,
Can you tell me a little bit about what the symptoms of that are, or
hmm
yes?
with post-traumatic stress disorder, so a person may have intrusive thoughts where they can walk into a place and it reminds them of that event,
Mm-hmm.
and they just start thinking about everything. It
Mm-hmm.
just takes them back to that event, to that place where it happened, the time, the who was there, what they had on, everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it could be dissociation. They can be in living in this particular world. They could be sitting in this room, but they may see it as where they were when the traumatic event
Mm-hmm.
happened,
I see.
because it
They're
may
kind of reliving it in their mind.
reliving it.
Uh-huh.
They're constantly reliving it.
Uh-huh.
You have the re-experiencing it where they may walk. It may go somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
or they may be sitting at home and something may remind them
Mm-hmm.
of this event, and so
Mm-hmm.
they re-experience the entire event
Mm-hmm.
just like it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
You have avoidance where people just will not talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they, whatever it is, I don't want to talk about it. Can I tell you later? Um, I would rather not tell you right now. Just avoiding talking about it. Or
Mm-hmm.
if somebody's talking about it, let's talk about something else. They'll go to a whole different subject. We're gonna, like you're not even talking about it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just that avoidance and that numbing feeling. I'm just numb to it. I'm not. I don't have any emotion about it. I don't. I don't have anything to say about it. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
crying about it. I'm not upset about it. I'm just numb.
Mm-hmm.
It happened. I'm just. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the just always feeling guilty,
Mm-hmm.
like it's my fault.
Mm-hmm.
It was because of me. It
Mm-hmm.
was something that I did. The reason why this particular thing happened. It could be just can't think positive about themselves, um, or just feeling down
Mm-hmm.
and depressed.
Mm-hmm.
Depressive symptoms goes along with post-traumatic stress disorder. They can have irritation,
Mm-hmm.
irritability because of that. Just and like I said, not being able to think positive, just always thinking bad about themselves, or
Mm-hmm.
I can't, I'm not good at this, or um, um, I'm not able to do that. I won't achieve, or I'm not going to be good at it, so I'm not going to do it. All
Mm-hmm.
because of the traumatic event.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what some. Those are just some of the symptoms.
Yes.
Kind of like a brief overview of
Mm-hmm.
what the symptoms may look like. And
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes it can happen one thing at a time, or it can be happening all at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know it's very common among military,
Mm-hmm.
the military, and it is true because
Mm-hmm.
most of them do experience all of that at one time. And
Uh-huh.
so, but you do have it when we have kids that may come in that may have been in some terrible situations, removed from the home, experienced some type of abuse,
Mm-hmm.
parents not there, witness criminal activity with the parents, all of this. And so they would have post-traumatic stress disorder because you can actually diagnose from the age of 6
Mm-hmm.
on up until adulthood
I see.
for post-traumatic stress disorder. So it is possible
Mm-hmm.
for small children to have these symptoms as well.
I see. I
Hmm
see. And so, what are some of the do's and don'ts in this PTSD?
Um, One of the main don'ts is just don't discount what people may be feeling. Um, if they're having those symptoms, you don't just say, "Oh, that's just it'll pass,"
Mm-hmm.
or "You'll get over it."
Mm-hmm.
Just go somewhere and just sit down and just you'll be all right. No, this is real.
Mm-hmm.
They're re-experiencing this stuff. It's really happening.
Mm-hmm.
Don't say stuff like, "Well, if I were you, I would do this,"
Mm-hmm.
or "I did this when I felt that way," or
Mm-hmm.
but they're not you, so
Mm-hmm.
you don't know, you know, what will work for them. They
Right.
may need something a little bit more than you did.
Right.
Hmm
And so you may have handled it in a way where your coping was more natural,
Right,
and they have what you might say disorder,
right, hmm
and they need other help
right.
that's not coming to them naturally.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the do's and don'ts sometimes are just across the board with mental
Mm-hmm.
health.
Yes.
So you just always want to be mindful. But I know sometimes when, especially like if people are dissociated or
Mm-hmm.
they kind of like removed from reality and they're re-experiencing, just know that it's real.
Mm-hmm.
It's really happening for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't invalidate what they're experiencing. You
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to get them to a place where they come back to reality and you can help them. Let's work through it. Let's talk about it. Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to go to a quiet place? Do you want to walk it out? Do you just want somebody to sit with you, to be here while you kind of calm down from it? What do you want to do? Do you want me to listen? Do you want my perspective? How do you want to, how do you need help right now? What
Mm-hmm.
can I do to help you through this?
Mm-hmm.
And so you always want to be that support with
Mm-hmm.
any diagnosis. You always want to be that support.
Yes, yes. So thank you.
You're welcome.
How about schizophrenia?
Schizophrenia. So schizophrenia is a little bit different because the main two symptoms is delusion or hallucinations. So you have to, it's real to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's real to the it's real to the client,
Mm-hmm.
whoever that person is. It's real to them,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's in their mind. It sounds
So the
strange.
schizophrenia is where you're seeing things, you
Seeing
see
things.
people, you have different people talking to you at one time and
Hmm.
having conversations in your head, and so you see creatures and
Yeah.
you can talk to people on the TV.
Hmm.
Yes.
So yeah, schizophrenia is with that delusion. Like you could say I'm this. Like I live out here. You might say I live in Texas. I just came over here. And because I came over here because the people were coming to my house to get me. And you're like, well, who are the people?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the people,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't really ever tell you who the people are.
Mm-hmm.
But it's in their mind. That's their experience.
Mm-hmm.
So they really think they live in Texas,
Mm-hmm.
and they came here because
Mm-hmm.
the people were out to get them.
Mm-hmm.
Hallucination. It could be auditory. It could be visual,
Mm-hmm.
where they can hear somebody talking to them, and they can say, well, this person told me
Mm-hmm.
to go do this, or
Mm-hmm.
this person told me to go walk down the street, or this person told me to go get a knife and do whatever. It
Mm-hmm.
could be harmful, it could be common, it can, but they're hearing it.
Mm-hmm.
It can be visual. Some people say, "Oh, you see that person? I was talking to the lady sitting right there." You're like, well, okay, yeah, she told me this, that, and the other.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the main two symptoms of schizophrenia.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not too much experience in either one, it may not be schizophrenia.
Mm-hmm.
Schizophrenia can have, there are comorbidities that can heighten schizophrenia, like drug use.
Mm-hmm.
If it's whether it's pills, whether it's whatever choice of drug it is.
Mm-hmm.
It can also be traumatic events
Mm-hmm.
can heighten those symptoms as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another one with schizophrenia is just the lack of motivation. You just don't have no motivation to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Most times it is psychotic,
Mm-hmm.
where it can be violent. It can be screaming, yelling, aggressive, um, and just kind of always living outside of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And there is quite a bit of paranoia
Mm-hmm.
with schizophrenia as well. Of course, there's a separate diagnosis with paranoia schizophrenia,
I see.
but
Mm-hmm.
paranoia is also included in schizophrenia.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not as intense as the diagnosis for paranoia schizophrenia.
Mm-hmm.
But schizophrenia is more common among adults.
Mm-hmm.
The onset can be early on in like adult adolescence,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't normally diagnose adolescents with schizophrenia. Is more like schizoaffective personality
Mm-hmm.
traits where they're showing some delusion, they're showing some hallucinations. But we also know some kids have imaginary friends.
Oh yes. Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to take all those different things into
Yes.
account before you just say, "Hey, yes, definitely."
Yeah.
So
Sometimes
schizophrenia,
it's a creative mind,
a
a
creative
natural,
mind,
normal creative mind
absolutely.
that
So
that in the
mhm,
childhood. Yes.
absolutely. So you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to discount those things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's not really just thrown out there for children,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more common for schizophrenia to be a diagnosis for adults.
I see.
And most times the onset is in adulthout.
Mm-hmm.
You can see some behaviors early on, but the onset of it is in adulthood.
Okay. Now, question uh, is there does not have to be drug usage to cause that.
No.
Drug usage can highlight it or make it worse,
Mm-hmm.
but there does not have to be any of that to cause it. Is that true?
Is that true? That's very true.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. There's plenty of people that don't have no drug use, never
Mm-hmm.
been involved with drugs, but they have a diagnosis for schizophrenia.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that chemical imbalance in the brain that
Mm-hmm.
causes that, and just not experiencing those delusions, those hallucinations, that paranoia is just, and it's real to them.
Yeah.
I had a client that she experienced all of them.
Mm-hmm.
She was paranoid at nighttime. She heard, people telling her to harm herself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she didn't have a lot of delusion, but she did have auditory hallucinations. She
Mm-hmm.
had the visual hallucinations. She would see people,
Mm-hmm.
and so eventually, she was like they were screaming in her head at all times. She
Mm-hmm.
couldn't quiet them down. She couldn't
Mm-hmm.
make them go away.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually, over time, it got better, but it is real and does exist, and it does happen.
I see. I
Hmm.
see.
Is it a
Yeah.
cure?
Um, for schizophrenia, so with mental health diagnosis, there is really no cure. It
Mm-hmm.
is pretty much typically just managing.
Mm-hmm.
You learn to manage it. You learn coping skills, whether it's medication management, whether it's talk therapy consistently, whether it's learning how to work with whatever symptoms you have. Some people have, hospital is in a residential facility for a lifetime, um, even in adulthood, because that's the way they can manage it. But it doesn't go away.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily a cure. It's just managing and learning how to maintain to be able to function.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
I see. And the reality of it is that we all have to cope,
We do.
manage,
Mm-hmm.
and function and maintain our cognitive,
Absolutely.
our minds.
Right.
Even the scripture says, be renewed in the spirit of
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
mind, and so everybody has to do some things for their
Absolutely.
mental health.
Uh-huh.
Read, sleep,
Whatever outlet.
rest.
It's
I
right.
mean, it's a lot of things that we have to do. I mean, I do things myself
Oh yeah.
to try to keep.
Keep your sanity.
I need to
Yeah.
keep my mind. I need to
Absolutely.
keep my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, thank you.
Thank you for
I'm
having
gonna try this again. Terica.
me, Terica. That's okay. It's all right.
Terica.
Terica.
Culver.
Culver.
Thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you.
You've been very helpful and informative. I really learned something from what you had to share with us today,
Thank you.
and this has been a very good conversation. And I pray and trust that others will take something from this conversation and be helpful to their family.
Absolutely.
And so we love you, our audience, Growing in Grace audience. We love you. We want you to like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. Let other people know about what we're talking about, because there are so many who really lack knowledge in this area. So this is one of the reasons why we're bringing more awareness to mental health issues that we may have ourselves or have it with our family members. And some things we ought to do and some things we ought not do. So that's why we're having this conversation. If there are other conversations that you feel like we should have that you've not heard on this podcast, and you feel like we should have this conversation, please email me at tcgigpodcast@gmail.com. tcgigpodcast@gmail.com. And you should see it in the lower third, but I'm going to say it one more time. That's tcgigpodcast@gmail.com. We love you, we appreciate you, and we'd like for you to come on back to the next podcast. God bless you all.